Good. And for whatever reason, it finally starts recording.
Because I was on early and I paused it, so you guys just didn't have me fussing with that.
Okay. All right. Okay, cool. So we're a week and a half in. How do you feel about things? All right, I'm getting some thumbs up. You guys doing all right? Okay. Oh, lots of head nods now that I have the whole matrix here in front of me. Okay, a couple of things, and the first thing is going to be unpleasant, a little bit unpleasant, but as you have probably noticed, I've been grading your stats homework from Wednesday. I'm almost done. I think I have about 4 more to do. There was a ton of plagiarized definitions of things like statistical population and biological population. So I've made note of that, and I noted it in your document. So open it up. It's a flattened image with my comments on it. We haven't gone through plagiarism yet, and the instructions in the worksheet were to rephrase these definitions in your own words, and most of you didn't do that. So since we haven't gone through plagiarism yet, we're granting you a little bit of grace, but don't do that. If you need to go, you can go to a website called plagiarism.org, and it explains a lot of different kinds of plagiarism, and so you should be aware of those things. We're actually going to spend a day on plagiarism later in this semester, so just make note of that, because it's good practice to not do that, and it's an honor code violation. So rather than give you an honor code violation and go through that whole process here on your first assignment that you ever turn in to us, I basically have just issued you a warning, told you in many cases what kind of plagiarism it was. A lot of times it was just, you just copied exactly the Wikipedia definition. In some cases, you replaced the Wikipedia definition with synonyms. And in some cases, those synonyms made the sentence still make sense. But in other cases, the synonyms actually just rendered the sentence meaningless. So just make a note of that as we go through here. I say this because you have a writing assignment coming up. When is it coming up? I should know this. I should have prepared for this before now. Where is the schedule? It's in the schedule. Oh, come on. It's also on the Moodle site. Well, no, it's not on the Moodle site. Let's see. So if you look on the schedule, it has on the 14th of September, so a little more than a week from now, you need to have a 1-page summary of the Hendry introduction section. So on Moodle, on the date of October 12th, there is an article written by Andrew Hendry and his colleagues about Galapagos finches. And on the 12th of October, you're going to have a literature summary that is due. It's a 2-page literature summary. A page and a half of it is summary, and a half a page is critical thought. And we'll talk to you more about what that means as we get closer to that date. But rather than have you do that writing assignment and turn it in for the first time on the day that it is due, we're having you draft the introduction. We're having you draft the methods and materials. So when you go and look at products due, you will see that the introduction is due on the 14th of September, and the methods and results is due on the 28th of September. And so as you're summarizing Hendry, practice not plagiarizing, practice summarizing things in your own words. If you're unfamiliar with plagiarism, like I said, go to plagiarism.org. And I should actually look, what's the day that we talk about plagiarism?
I'm just pulling that up.
We talk about plagiarism for the whole day on the 25th of September. So the plagiarism.com link is there, once again, in the products due section. So you can go and access that and educate yourselves about that before we get to that point.
There we go.
Once again, the participation grade is more about completion than correctness. So when you messed up the math, I made notes about when the math went wrong and things like that. hopefully yesterday and what I'm going to do for the next couple of minutes will have clarified some of that. If you're still having trouble with how to calculate these things, just schedule a time to come by with Dr. Judd or myself, and we will walk you through the calculations. In some cases, there was just simple mathematical mistakes, but in other cases, I was like, whoa, where'd you get that number? And I usually I wrote something like, not sure where this number came from, and things like that. So that's that. So look for those in your email. Open them up and read through them because there are comments scattered throughout the assignment on them. What else, Dr. Judd, do you have?
I think that's good. Are we going to put that daily schedule, a modified version of that for them on Moodle? I think that'd be a good idea for us to. I don't think I saw that up there.
I thought I had put it up there.
Well, double check, but otherwise, I think that was the only other thing I had.
Oh, yeah, I can check that, but yeah, it should have been up there already. I thought it's in the day one materials.
Oh, right. Okay, that's what I
Day one materials has the schedule and the syllabus. We can move them up to the general tab though and put them there also. They're in day one because that's the day we covered it. That's where my head was on that day. I don't know why. Stupid to put them in day one because you can't see them unless you remember that we did that on day one. So, okay, I'm going to briefly just finish up what we were talking about before. So bear with me for just a minute as I share my screen. And then Dr. Judd is going to work with you. Can you guys see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yes, no, yes. Okay, all right, cool. So we were working with the small versions of the actual beak links from Academy Bay. And like I said before, they don't really look very normally distributed. They don't overlap at all. And when we calculate 95% confidence intervals, you notice that this mean does not appear in the confidence interval of this mean, and this mean doesn't fit within the confidence interval of this other mean. And that's generally how you can kind of visually tell whether or not two means are different, two averages are different. But I mentioned at the very end of class yesterday, on Wednesday, that these are just a selection of 5 finches from a larger sample of 63 finches from Academy Bay and 70 finches from El Garapatero. And these are the 2 sites that are actually in the Hendry et al. Paper. So it's very applicable to everything. Well, when you look at the Academy Bay finches, they look a little more normally distributed than the small sample did. And that's because it's just a bigger sample of finches. When you look at El Garapatero, they look a little more normal, although you see that there's this trough here in the middle, which indicates that there's a mode here and then there's another mode here. Well, now that we have 63 and 70 finches, we have a clearer view of what the population is like because we just have a bigger sample. And when we look at these two things overlapped, we see that they overlap with one another a lot. And so if we were to take the averages and calculate 95% confidence intervals on these data, we would actually see that the range of values is much smaller than it was here. It goes from like below about 10 up to about 12.5. And on this figure, it goes from 11.5 to 12.4. So the range is much smaller on the y-axis. But now that we have a much clearer idea of what the two populations are, we actually see that this mean from Academy Bay totally fits within the confidence interval of the El Garapatero mean, and the mean from El Garapatero fits totally within the confidence interval of Academy Bay. So we have 2 different conclusions. Here we would conclude that these 2 means are not different from one another, whereas with the smaller sample, we would conclude that they are different from one another, but it's because of the effective sample size. When we only have 5 finches from each population, we just don't have a very clear idea. Now you'll notice that this figure has 1 scale on the y-axis. This figure has a different scale on the y-axis, and it's always useful if you're going to compare things to present them so that the y-axis is the same everywhere. So here is another figure of the 2 figures, the 5 finch figure and the 63 and 70 finch figure, where you basically see that these confidence intervals are much smaller than these confidence intervals because we have more finches. Not only that, but the average value of beak length has changed for both of the populations because once again, we have a clearer picture of what's going on in the population. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay, all right, so let's recap. Why do we have to run statistics on sample data? Anybody?
Because to take like the full population would just take too many resources, it would take too long than just taking samples.
Okay, so that's why we sample, but why do we have to run statistics on those samples? Somebody else. So Connor got why we sample. Why do we then need statistics? Why do we have to calculate the mean and the 95% confidence interval?
I can guarantee that our information is as correct as we can get it, and there's not glaring mathematical problems with it.
Well, okay, so correct. I'm not sure what you mean by that, but somebody else give it a shot. Who was that, Cameron? Okay.
So I think it's to identify relationships between different populations or samples.
Okay, so ultimately we probably want to compare these samples to one another, and if we're going to compare one sample to another sample, we need to have some idea of how variable that population is that we drew that from, and we do that by calculating 95% confidence intervals. And then that way we can actually make direct comparisons if we know what the sample sizes are and all that, and we do our math correctly. Why is reporting and graphing the 95% confidence intervals mean better or more useful than reporting and graphing the standard deviation of the mean? What is the 95% confidence interval telling us that a standard deviation doesn't tell us?
Okay, I could be wrong, but I
Who's
think
this?
the standard deviation is showing us like the range in which it's acceptable for your data to be away from the mean, whereas the confidence interval is showing us how precisely confident we are with the mean itself.
Yeah, I'm not sure that that's a very good explanation. Who was that?
Tessa.
Oh, Tessa. Okay. You must be on screen too. I should switch to active speaker mode. Ah, there you are. Somebody else take a shot at this.
The 95% confidence interval says that 95% of the sample means that you take will be like within that range.
And why is that useful? I can't hear you. Why is that useful? Hello? Unmute yourself.
Standard deviation like tells you like or like is less specific and like less broad than the 95% confidence interval. So it tells the 95% confidence interval will tell you more about like the population as a whole.
So if you know that 95% of the means drawn from that population fall within that range, what does that allow you to do when you look at another mean?
I guess you would know like that mean is like whether or not it's in that interval or not.
Yeah, it's easy to see whether or not it's very likely if that mean is in that interval. If that mean is not in that interval, then that mean probably was generated by sampling a different population. Why are larger samples more useful than smaller samples?
because larger samples like allow you to get like a smaller thing. I was trying to say it allows you to be more precise than a smaller sample.
Okay, I wouldn't use the word precise because remember the definitions for precision. But basically, you're right at the beginning, and that the larger sample does a better job of estimating what the population mean is. So yeah, good.
Yes, sir.
Do you feel confident that you could calculate the 95% confidence interval of the mean on a small data set on an exam? I'm going to put up a grid. Tell me if you feel confident about that. Just raise your hand. Okay. Then if you don't feel confident, you need to practice, go back through the homework assignment and practice, or you need to come and see Dr. Judd or myself, and we'll work on building that confidence. The easiest way to learn how to do statistics is to practice doing the calculations by hand. And so if you have to, you can make up data sets that are just random numbers that you thought up in your head and do the calculations on those things. Like I said, if you're still struggling with what you should be doing with the actual calculations themselves, then come to us and we can help you out with that. All right, any questions? All right, Dr. Judd, I'm guessing you're going to want to put people in groups?
Yes.
Okay,
So,
I'll work on that while you begin your introduction to what you have for them today.
okay, great. All right, close that.
Because the grouping thing is still not working for whatever reason.
Gotcha. Okay, we'll do a little intro while you get those set up. That sounds good. Okay, so you all should have word clouds. So you'll need those out. And you'll probably also need either a piece of paper or your iPad or some other surface to take notes on or work with in addition to the screen you're looking at. So today we're going to get into a topic that we're going to hit on repeatedly from different angles and different perspectives and different assignments over the course of the semester. We're going to be talking about evolution by natural selection. But instead of doing that in a typical lecture format, we're going to walk through an activity together, kind of build up our learning objectives for the day, and then I'll go over what it is we accomplished, sort of what parts of understanding evolution by natural selection we've covered.
Hey, Nathan.
Yeah.
I think since you started the meeting early, you're now the moderator, so I don't have a breakout room function in my screen.
Stand by, give me just a moment.
Oh, there it is. Okay,
okay.
Cool. Awesome. I'll work on that while you're introducing things.
All right. So I was going to jump sort of pretty straight into the breakout rooms, but what we'll do here is, that's okay. Hopefully you all have a word cloud that looks something like this. So what I'd like you to do actually to get us started is if you have this, have your word cloud, take a few minutes, ask yourself what are the 5 largest words, what are some of the other words that maybe also show up large. Can anyone know how the word cloud generator decides how big to make all the different words?
Is it the frequency of like how often the words are said within the text that you selected?
That's exactly right. And so what do you think the frequency of the use of a word in a text says about the content of the argument or the story that's being told?
That it's important.
Yeah, good, right? So what I want you to do is take a few minutes right before we get into the group breakout sessions is to, just using that concept map, try to imagine how those main ideas and processes that you're seeing in the words there are related to each other, and try to connect those ideas and processes using the same concept map format that you used in lab. So work on your own for just a moment, and then we get into the breakout rooms, you're going to work together and see what similarities you have, or if someone else had a good idea you hadn't thought of, that sort of thing. And you'll pull together a group concept map. In the end, you'll find that there's an assignment folder our assignment spot on Moodle. So at the end of the class, when we're done with all of this, I want you to take your concept map. If it's electronic, you can make it a PDF. And if it's a something you're doing on paper, you can just snap a photo with your phone or something like that and upload that image to the folder. Either way should work. So that'll be your participation assignment. Make sure you've got some sort of name identifier on there for yourself.
I'm almost there. I got one more name to add.
I'll be curious, Paul, to know whether
Okay.
you're capable of moving around between groups. So take a few minutes.
Okay.
You're doing it on your
We
own.
can-
Give yourself about 5 minutes, and then you'll have, I'll come around the rooms and check, but I'm expecting probably about 10 minutes for you guys to work together on your group concept maps. If it takes a few minutes more, that's okay.
So you want me to send them to the rooms now?
Yep.
We're set up.
All right.
All right, here we go. Nathan, you didn't get assigned anywhere. So I have to assign you, I'm going to assign you to room 1. And
I wonder, so let me, before I jump
Yep.
in there, participants. So if you click participants and then you click on me and click the little more down arrow, you can make,
participants,
yep.
Click on more.
And
I can make, oh, you want me to make you host?
yeah, can you make me host again?
I'm going to make you host again. There you go, bro.
All right.
Now you probably have to assign me to a room.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yep.
Okay.
So,
And I'll probably be stuck there for forever. It's like purgatory.
okay. Let's see. How about, I'm just going to pick one.
Okay.
You can come back to the main room anytime if you want to like get out of their hair for a moment. Okay.
Okay, I guess I'll start. So the biggest word I got was selection, and I got the other ones were horned, lizards,
Predation.
Yeah. I don't know, like,
What is a shrike?
yeah, shrikes.
I ain't never heard of that word before in my life.
A shrike
That's
is a
probably-
kind of, did anyone have a guess?
Is it like a bird or something?
Yep, it's a type of bird.
Okay.
Yeah.
So those are like the biggest ones I got. I don't know about everybody else, but nice.
So I've got
oh,
no.
yeah.
You wanna
No,
go
you
on?
can go. You can go.
Okay. We got selection, and then I actually split it up into 2 separate lizards because on mine there's like one lizard that's bigger than the other. So I have lizard 1 that goes to Shrike, which I assume like selection, lizard, Shrike eats lizard or something. And then I have on lizards 2, I have this separate group of lizards, has horns, is longer, defensive, and then there's this weird word that I didn't know, but I wrote down, starts with a P, but it means horns. So yeah, I kind of just split them up into the biggest words under selection.
Was that word parietal?
No, it was PHRYNOSOMOA.
Oh yeah.
I looked it up and it means horns on a lizard, I think. So
Audrey, did you have something to say?
Yes, I had almost the same words as all of you guys. The only one that was different was squamosal. I think that's how you pronounce it. And I didn't know what that was, so I looked it up, and it's the squamous portion of the temporal bone So somewhere, it says it works with mammals and their lower jaw. Not really sure anymore about it, but
That's a challenging one, and I'll give you a little help on that one because it has to do with position on an animal. So that means kind of like lateral on an organism. So like your jaw's on the side here, or horns on the side. That's what, there's two words, there's parietal and squamosal, refers to horns in different places. Joe, is your word cloud on a piece of paper in front of you or anything? Can you hold up to the camera? I'm curious about how big that word was.
Oh, no. It's actually
okay.
not. I like
No
a sketch. Which one?
Yeah, no
It's
worries.
not that big. It's a little bit smaller than parietal.
Okay, got it. All right, so to keep talking about connections among some of these words, now that you know you've all got similar words, and what do you think the story might be about that uses these words? And you've got to start there, right? Shrike eats lizard was one suggestion. I'm gonna check on one of the other groups. I'll be back.
I think they like characteristics.
He's here.
Hello. So did you all have similar size words?
Yeah, we all pretty much have the exact same, like, top 5 or 6.
Yeah. Have you started trying to figure out what that story was and how the concept map could line up to the story?
Mm-hmm.
So we're thinking that the horned lizards have the horns to protect themselves from the shrike, which is a predatory bird. The selection of that comes in where the lizards with the longer horns are better protected from the birds, while the shorter horns don't have as much protection.
Nice. And what was your largest word?
Mine was predation.
It was predation. Did everyone else have predation as the largest word?
Mine was selection.
Mine's selection.
That's what I got.
Mine was also selection.
Actually, my bad. Mine was selection. I just wrote predation first.
Okay, nice. So, how could you get that word into your little concept map?
Natural selection.
I don't know if it's natural selection, but I guess that's a possibility because we don't really know like the whole story yet. It's just our guess. So like.
That's good. Did natural show up? Did any of you see that word in the word cloud?
No.
No.
I made 2 examples, and I found natural showed up as kind of like a middle size word, right? Mm-hmm. Not one of the top 10 or whatever, but pretty big. So that's a good thing that you noted there, that selection and natural selection or evolution by natural selection aren't necessarily exactly the same thing. But nonetheless, if you either thought of it in terms of just selection or you think, okay, that's probably shorthand for natural selection, you'll still make a good concept map that you'll get credit for. So you can think about that either way. So think about what selection might do with regard to these birds and your little story of their interaction with the lizards. And I think I'm going to check on one of the other groups, but I'll be back.
All right.
All right.
Hello. Let's see. Did you all find that you had similar words that were biggest? Have you started stitching together a concept map of what the story might be that this paper is about?
Are we supposed to do it like with our whole group or like just with our 5 words?
You can use more than just the 5 words, and I wanted you guys to have a few moments while Paul was getting things set up to start it with yourself, but then see what you found in common. Like, did you all come up with the same interpretation of the word cloud and what the story might be? Were there any unfamiliar words that you had to look up or figure out what they meant?
Yeah, I had to look up squamosal.
And what'd you find?
And that it's corresponding bones in other vertebrates.
Yeah.
And then phyronosoma, something like that.
Yep. Phrynosoma.
Yeah.
And what was that?
Just the genus for toad-bodied.
Yeah, for it's the genus for the horned lizard in this case, but sometimes they're called the horny toad or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or toad-bodied lizard. Did anyone have to look anything else up? What do you think's going on?
My words were like all related to the horn, like, and like it was like length and function and selection. So like how like it's all connected, and like is the length like part of natural selection, and then like what's the function like with the length of the horn.
Does anybody so that's great. That's a lot of what it's about. Anyone come up with a guess as to what the length of the horn might mean for the lizard?
Intimidation or mating.
Could be. What were some of those big words that were on there that might be an important part of the story?
Predators is pretty big on mine.
Yeah. Yep. Predation. You guys know what a shrike is? That's probably like the 7th or 8th largest word. I'm going to check on one of the other groups, but I want you to think about or look up, I guess, what a shrike is and how that might link into to what Katie was already starting to think about and share. Sound good? All right, I'll see you soon. You guys find you had similar words?
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. And did you start to knit together a concept map about what the story might be?
Yes.
What do you think?
Well, it all starts off with selection.
Yeah.
And then our topic of our selection would be lizards.
Good.
And how they're, can I?
Go ahead, you got it.
Okay. And how, like, their predators are shrikes, I believe.
All right.
And more specifically, flat-tailed shrikes. And then, obviously, the lizards are horned, and they use those as a defensive function. And their parietals, I guess, like, the longer they are, the more defensive they can be.
And is there a link, maybe somebody else, is there a link between that defense and the selection that you started with?
I kind of don't see, well, in my word bubble, I kind of don't see more of a defense. I see more of a predation, like they're more predators than prey. I see them as more.
You think the lizards might be predators?
Yeah, I think because the horned is the defensive mechanism to be, not to be messed with. I have, horns, scary little horns that, you know, scare off their what they're called their predators. And so, and then also with the link that ties into it too, and then flat-tailed as well, it can also depend on their natural selection or where they are.
Yeah, so it sounds like you two are thinking about it thinking about the same thing from two different perspectives, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're thinking about the lizard, Daniel's thinking about the bird. Anything else that any of the other two want to add in?
I think they about covered it.
All right, I'm going to check on one more group and then we'll come back together as a class, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
All right, do you guys have concept map?
I kind of jotted my ideas down in paragraph form. It was easy for me to get it on paper. And I was going to do the concept map later.
Okay. And tell me briefly before I go back to the big room with everybody, what did you guys think the story is about probably?
What I emphasized on was like the necessities as far as species needed to make those adaptations to survive in their habitats or against predators who are trying to make their species extinct, things of that nature. And connected it back to the bigger points you talked about, like requiring nutrients and energy and defense from the concept of yesterday in lab.
Good. And did anyone anyone add into that kind of big picture view what specific species they think are involved in this particular story?
I think we're going to talk a lot about lizards because that was one of the bigger words was lizards and horned lizard.
Yep. And were there any words you had to look up or didn't know from the word cloud?
There were some I didn't know, but they were smaller, so I didn't think I needed to look them up.
Yeah. Was the horned lizard the only organism in your word cloud?
There's loggerhead.
Yeah, loggerhead, and there was another word in there that wasn't on the top 5, but it was shrike. So we're going to go back to the main group, but we're going to learn about what a loggerhead shrike is if you don't already know. All right. All right, we're going to go back. Close now. Oh, I see. Okay, good.
Dr. Judd, just so you know.
Yep.
I have a shrike.
Oh, nice.
And I have a kestrel.
Oh, excellent. Great. All right, I think that's everyone back. All right, so what did you think? Were you able to get, did you all come up with the same story and the same concept map, or did you find there were some different interpretations and different things you all found among your groups?
In our group, they were all pretty similar in the ways that we drew them out.
So what this activity does is it gives you a chance to, without actually
diving in the main group?
Oh yeah, here we go. Without actually diving into the paper and, head first, deep end sort of thing, this is another example of giving you a chance to sort of preview what it's going to be about and think about what you already know, because that influences what you see, what patterns you see, and what you think about when you first take a look at that preview. In this case, the word cloud. Often, so I did a similar activity with word clouds as a preview early on, but now I tend to first look through the figures of a paper and then maybe read the abstract. And that kind of primes you for the kinds of concepts you're probably going to encounter as you read the paper. And we're going to be reading a lot of papers in this class. So that's the idea here. It's a way to ease yourself in to what might seem like a pretty dense piece of writing. Often you'll find that science writing is pretty to the point, and it can seem kind of dense because not a lot of filler words in between. And we'll be talking about that more when we talk about writing reports, literature reports, for example. All right, so the next step is to actually jump in. So on Moodle, in today's folder, you'll see the Young et al. Et al means and others. When you see that before, it means and others. So if there's a paper with multiple authors, you'll see et al. I think the file is titled Young Horned Lizards paper, something like that. It's on Moodle in today's folder. So open that up. It's about a page long. And I want you just to take a few minutes and read the paper. And then we'll come back together as a group. We will, once I get thumbs up that people are able to download and look at the paper, then we'll send you back into your breakout groups because I want you guys to think about the concept map you just drew and think about how you might want to update it or change it or add things in maybe based on actually having read the paper and now you know what the story is. All right, I'm seeing some thumbs up. That's good. Once again, I'm going to bounce around, but I'll give you a few minutes to just read the paper without me breathing over your shoulder virtually. You guys still reading or are you onto the concept maps?
Oh no, yeah, we're onto the concept maps now.
Okay, cool.
So I was kind of just saying like that your like initial inference, if it was correct, then to just kind of expand upon that and make sure your map is a little more what's the word, like specified, I guess.
Yep.
But if your inference was incorrect, then to just like kind of rearrange it or remap it to have it be more accurate to the paper that we just read.
Cool. I'm going to check another room, but why don't you guys talk about, see if any of you have, drawn the same things, add anything in the same way. Just kind of compare a little bit. Normally we'd be doing this on a whiteboard and it'd be a lot easier to work it all out together. Yeah. All right, I'm going to check on room 4 again. So what do you guys think? You update your concept maps? Did you learn anything new about what you thought it was going to be versus what it turned out to be about? Did you add anything? Go ahead.
It was kind of similar because I saw predation in the word cloud. So it felt like it was going to be some study on the predation of horned lizards in association with the length of some way.
Yeah, good. And did you end up adding anything, any clarification to your concept map once you actually read the paper?
I was going to get around to defining the terms parietal and squamosal.
yeah, squamosal.
Yeah, they were smaller inside the concept map, but in this article, it actually seems important to selection itself.
Nice, good observation. Yep, and I'll have a little image defining those for you in just a few minutes. Yeah. Okay, cool. It sounds like you guys are talking about it, and I'm going to check on one other group that was still reading last time I saw them, and then we'll come back as a class. Did you all have a chance to compare your updated concept maps? Did you change things or add anything?
I pretty much left mine the same.
All right. Anybody else?
Mine stayed the same.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh, well, I've been bouncing around and and Paul is stuck with one room. So I think what I'm going to do, instead of just going over things that I'll repeat myself on, I'm going to call us back to the main group in just a moment, okay? Let me check on the first group and then I'll call everyone back.
I do think they are relatively small, but yeah, they look really small. So,
I mean, that would make sense. Like, it doesn't look like the horns get like that much longer when they start getting longer. So, I mean, that makes sense how that would help with the small birds.
Yeah.
Sounds like you guys are in deep already. You already updated your concept map and you're interpreting the paper. Good. Okay, I'm going to call us all back together as a class then.
Okay.
Because like he paused and I was like, oh shoot.
Is that everyone? Almost. All right, so what is this paper about? Someone get us started.
Neither of you. All right.
Predation.
Go ahead.
My bad. But I think it's about predation and how they're trying to adapt to keep their population numbers up.
And who's they?
The lizards.
And what are they adapting to?
The birds.
Right, and what's special about this interaction between these lizards and these birds? I mean, all kinds of predators eat all kinds of prey. Why this paper?
I think it's mostly analyzing the squamosal horns. Is that correct? Is that how you pronounce that? Squamosal?
Squamosal is the correct pronunciation, yep.
Okay, and just basically how the likelihood of survival between the difference of those horns when it comes to the predation of shrikes. Shrikes, yeah.
Good, yep. And what's
These shrikes
interesting,
also-
go ahead, yeah.
They also impale the lizards on various items to kill in order to kill them. So that is very unique.
Yeah, what does that give us a nice record of?
Lizard bodies.
Right? Yeah, and what's different about those lizards than the ones you catch running around, obviously? And there's not just that they're dead lizard bodies. What is it about their death that matters here?
The soft flesh has been eaten away.
Yep, by the shrikes, right?
By the shrikes.
So
yeah.
it's not just dead lizards, it's dead lizards that we know the cause of death. You could go out and collect carcasses of any creature, but in this case, you know, because of how it was impaled, that it's the shrike. So let me show you. Some of you I saw were looking things up, making use of the resources you have, which is good. I'm going to share my screen here. And so this is what we just did. We read the article and updated your concept maps. Everyone see my screen now? So we got a figure from the paper here, A and B. We got this lizard carcass. And this is a shrike with a captured lizard. And here's the sort of older, now that the body's removed, the head is still there. And here's a lizard that has a defensive posture. See those horns sticking out in the back? So what do you notice about this bird in terms of it being a predator? Is this the typical kind of bird you think of when you think of a predatory bird that hunts other animals?
No, it just looks like a songbird.
Yeah, it's a passerine bird, right? It's a perching bird. So notice these feet, right? These aren't really like a big eagle or hawk or something that can, land on the prey and grab it and tear it apart and fly with it. Instead, its beak is what's adapted to hunting. And one of the things that it does is use that beak to try to attack the lizard at the neck to get that spine. And that's why these horns, they think, presumably, are involved in defense. Paul, do you want to show people the shrike that you have?
Yeah, sure. So we have some taxidermied specimens in our collection here. And so this is a shrike, and if I hold it up next to my head, you can see how big it is. And this is a kestrel. And so they're not that different in size, but the kestrel is a falcon. It's in the family of the birds of prey and other hawks and falcons and things like this. This is a songbird, as somebody mentioned, a perching bird, like a mockingbird. And when you look at the legs on this shrike, you see that they are thin and weak. But when you look at the legs on the kestrel, similarly sized bird, but the legs and feet are much thicker and stronger. So kestrel feet, shrike feet, kestrel feet, and shrike feet right next to one another. The shrike has weak feet, so while it catches things with its beak, you see that they both have similarly shaped beaks, it can't hold the prey down and rip it apart because it has weak feet. So it impales the prey so that the prey are now held in place, not by the weak feet, but by a thorn or something like that, or a piece of barbed wire. And then it uses its strong beak to rip the flesh off of it. It's why they're also called butcher birds, is because of this habit. Birds.
Nice. Excellent. Okay, so let's share this again. All right, so some of you noticed phrynosoma as one of the important words, maybe not one of the top 5, but a big one. What is phrynosoma? What's that word, and why is it italicized in the paper?
Is it the scientific name for the lizards?
Yeah, it's the genus name for lizards like these. Now, this species has long horns, but did anyone find, has anyone ever seen a lizard like this? Do they all have big horns like this? Have you ever been out west and seen horny toad, or whatever they call the common name of these things?
The mascot of Texas Christian University.
Nice. So it turns out that the texture of these things is actually not generally thought to be a defense mechanism in terms of fighting off predators. It's thought to be more of a crypsis. So some of you have talked about camouflage in lab, and we talked about that new term crypsis, as opposed to just saying camo. The bumpy sort of irregular outline of these things, which you can see along their bodies and along their legs, and also around the crown of their head, is involved in sort of obscuring that outline so that they're harder for predators to see in general. Shrikes aren't necessarily the only predator these things have to defend against, and so being cryptic is a pretty good way of hiding and avoiding predators. But in some places, the range, the distribution of where these lizards live and where the shrikes live overlap. And the shrikes will eat all kinds of things, and one of the food items in the area where they overlap, of course, is the horned lizards. So someone explain to me what the hypothesis was about the relationship between horn length and the shrikes.
Well, I'm pretty sure it said that if the horns were longer, they had a more chance of surviving, because when they found the dead skulls, opposed to like the living lizards, the dead lizard skulls had like shorter horns.
Nice. Okay, good. So I want to dissect the concept of horned. Sorry, let me go back here. Of longer and shorter just a little bit. So I'm going to take a look at the graphs, those two plots that they've got in the bottom section of the screen, and tell me what that x-axis is labeled. Is it just labeled horn length, or is it labeled something else?
I think it's a head length.
Yeah, residual is the one I was looking for. We'll talk about head length in a moment. Head length is important to calculating residual. So let's give you a little definition of what's going on here. So there are small lizards and big lizards. Some lizards are bigger at maturity than others, and young lizards are obviously smaller than adult lizards. So there's some variation in size of the animal, and since most of the animal is eaten, instead of measuring the length of a dead lizard, they had to measure the length of the head, part that the shrike didn't eat, right? And usually head size is a pretty good proxy for body size. If we measured everyone's head and measured everyone's everyone's height in this class, then you have a sample of the ratio of head length to height, and we could make a pretty good guess about how tall someone is based on their head size if we took someone else random from the campus, right? So that's the idea here, that we can use head length as kind of a proxy or a good estimator, a good substitute for body size. And then there's the length of the horns. So is there a situation where you could have really long horns but still be really vulnerable to shrike predation? Can anyone imagine a situation where you have reasonably long horns overall, but you're still vulnerable to shrike predation?
I guess if you're at maturity, but your body is just small and your horns are longer.
And if your body was small and your horns are longer and that shrike is going in for the kill right at the neck, right behind that crown of horns, then that shrike's using its head, right? It's using its face to attack its food. And so its eyes are going to be vulnerable. Its skull, everything about it, mostly its eyes are going to be vulnerable. So if you had really long horns and a small body, it might be kind of hard for that shrike to get in there, right?
Yeah.
So if you had a pretty big shrike and a pretty big lizard, but that lizard had relatively small horns for its body size, then it'd be vulnerable to those bigger shrikes, right? And the same thing, a little lizard with long horns, as you guys were just saying, is in good shape, but a little lizard with short horns is going to be in bad shape. So what we have here is a relationship that we can fit, a linear model where you can make a pretty good guess about horn length from head length in any lizard. But no lizard fits perfectly on that linear model. The black dots represent the real data, and the residual is the difference between the predicted horn length based on the head length and the actual horn length at that head length for each lizard you might observe. So a dot here is a lizard, and this is a vulnerable lizard, and this is a well-defended lizard. At least with respect to the shrike. That's what matters here, with respect to the shrike whose eyes are vulnerable when it goes in for the kill. So a couple of these terms we were talking about, squamosal horn length. The squamosal horns are these outer horns that are kind of lateral on the head. So when they measured squamosal horn length, they were measuring tip to tip on those lateral horns. And then parietal horn length are the ones in the back, and this is how they measured parietal horn length. And then of course head length here. So how can you calculate, if this is all you have, just a diagram like this, how could you calculate a residual horn length? You want to correct for head length. Oh, we're already at the 10-minute mark. Okay, so what I want to do is get you guys thinking about where this residual comes from. It's basically the horn length in relation to the head size. So it's kind of a ratio of horn length to head length. But in this case, instead of just dividing it, we're creating a linear model of head length and body size, and then using this difference as that measure of horn length. Okay. So what did they find? Did they find that there's a selection for longer horns? Someone?
Nathan, it's 1:35.
Okay. All right, we're gonna have to pick this up then next time. I thought that was 10 minutes before the end of class, but it's 10 minutes before the next class starts. So we'll pick up right here and we'll talk about these graphs and what they mean at the beginning of class next time on Monday.
And on Monday, we'll start talking about the Galapagos Islands, and there is on the Moodle site a homework assignment for you. Put your answers to that assignment in a Word file, save it as a PDF, and zip it to me by the beginning of class on Wednesday.
All right. We'll pick up here next time and wrap it up. Thanks, guys.
Hey, Dad, do you still want us turning in the concept map?
Yes, you can still upload that at this point since you've already read the paper. Yeah.
Nathan, is this recording going to be on your machine or my machine, or do you know?
I'm not sure yet. I think it
Okay,
might be
I'm going to
mine.
leave and we'll see.
Okay.
All right.